Okay, so are you ready to dive into something interesting with me today?
Always. What are we exploring today?
Today it's the world of freedom and religion.
Hmm. These two seem like they're pretty different.
Right, these seem like total opposites.
Yeah, totally.
What if I told you they're more like intertwined threads?
Intertwined threads.
Yes, in the same tapestry.
Now that's a fascinating idea. It's a paradox.
It really is.
Because we see freedom and religion as conflicting so often.
Yeah, for sure.
But they actually have a deep connection when you really think about it.
Right, and that's exactly what we're unpacking today.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
We're doing a deep dive into excerpts from Hans Joas' book.
Okay.
It's called NUW, Under the Spell of Freedom.
Catchy title.
And it explores how some really brilliant minds of the early 20th century wrestled with this idea.
The interplay of freedom and religion.
Exactly.
I like it. So what's Joas's take on all of this?
Well, one of the biggest things he highlights is this shift
Okay.
away from all those rigid religious doctrines.
Moving away from dogma.
Yeah, and instead focusing on the raw, personal experience of faith.
So less about the rules and more about what faith actually feels like.
You got it. It's less about the rules
Okay.
and more about what faith feels like on a personal level.
I like that. So it's about lived experience rather than just doctrine.
Exactly.
Well, that makes me think of William James.
Oh, how so?
He was a huge proponent of this idea.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he argued that to really understand religion, we need to look beyond the dogma
Right.
and focus on individual experiences.
It's a human side of it.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, in his book, The Varieties of Religious Experience, he says something like, and I'm paraphrasing here, that religious institutions, doctrines, they all stem from these deep personal experiences.
It's like instead of getting caught up in theological debates, we should be asking.
What's the root of it all?
Yeah. What is it about being human that makes these really intense feelings of faith even possible?
Now, that's a question that fascinated a lot of thinkers back then, and it's where Rudolf Otto comes in. Have you heard of him?
I'm not familiar with his work.
He was obsessed with this idea of the numinous.
What?
The numinous. It's that feeling of awe-inspiring mystery.
Okay.
That sense of something bigger than ourselves.
I can see where he's going with this.
It's like touching something profound.
Right. And regardless of your specific religion, that feeling of awe does seem to be a common thread.
It's a powerful thread. And Otto believed this numinous aspect was what gave religion its lasting power.
Even as the world modernized.
Especially as the world modernized.
Okay, I can see.
Even with more people moving away from traditional religion, that core experience remained.
This is where things get a little tricky for me, though.
Oh, how so?
How does this idea of freedom fit in with these powerful religious experiences?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Like, if religion is rooted in these intense feelings,
Right.
where does free will come into play?
That is the million-dollar question. And it's where we bump into this concept of indebted freedom.
Indebted freedom.
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea that Paul Tillich explored.
Okay, and
He argued that our ability to choose freely, to exercise free will, it might actually be a gift itself.
A gift?
Yeah, something we're indebted to, not something we create entirely on our own.
So you're saying even before we make the choice to believe, we're already under the influence of something beyond ourselves.
That's the gist of it, yes.
Wow, that's heavy stuff.
It makes you think, right? And it really challenges that classic secularization theory.
You mean the idea that modernity kills religion?
Exactly. It's not that simple.
So it's more complicated than that.
Way more complicated.
I'm ready to go deeper on this. How does freedom actually challenge that old narrative?
Well, that's a great question, and it leads us to thinkers like Charles Taylor. Well, he really challenged that idea that modernity just equals the death of religion.
So it's not that cut and dry?
No, not at all. It's more about how faith transforms in a modern world.
Okay, so it's not so much that religion is dying.
Right.
It's that it's evolving.
Exactly. It's like we live in a world where you don't have to believe. It's not like how it was in the past.
Yeah, totally. Belief isn't a given anymore.
Exactly.
Right.
But even with that freedom to choose, people still think about the big questions. Like, what's the meaning of it all? What's our purpose? Is there something bigger than ourselves?
Those questions never really go away, do they?
They really don't. And, you know, Joas doesn't just focus on Western thinkers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he brings in a global perspective.
Okay, so he's considering other cultures.
Yes. He wants us to consider how all these different cultures and religions throughout history have dealt with these ideas.
Freedom and faith.
Yeah.
I like that.
He reminds us that these questions are universal.
Yeah, no matter where or when you live, right?
Right, so it's not just a Western thing.
Okay. Well, one thing that really stood out to me
Yeah, what's that?
was this whole idea of Hegel's shadow.
Oh, yeah. What about it?
Well, it seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, how so?
Here you have Hegel, this champion of reason,
Yeah, the master of logic.
but he's wrestling with the meaning of freedom and religion. That's a good point. It's like this underlying tension.
Exactly.
I mean, on the surface, it doesn't make sense.
It really doesn't.
But Hegel couldn't escape those big questions.
Even with all that reason and logic.
Yeah, it's like they snuck in the back door.
It's kind of funny when you think about it.
It is, but it makes you realize that no one is immune to those big questions.
That's a good point. No one is immune.
And this leads us to something else Joas brings up,
Oh, yeah. What's that?
the secular option.
Right, and like we've been saying,
It's not a simple choice.
right, like an on-off switch.
Exactly. It's more like a whole spectrum of ways people approach faith.
And these aren't just abstract ideas.
You got it.
These are about how people are actually living their lives.
Exactly. And that takes us to one final point that really resonated with me.
Let's hear it.
It's this idea of the price of freedom.
What do you mean the price?
Well, it's like anything else.
Freedom comes with its own set of challenges.
Okay, I'm listening.
So what happens when we take freedom to its extreme?
Is he saying too much freedom is bad?
Not bad, necessarily,
Okay.
but we need to think about the potential downsides.
Like what?
Well, he talks about the dangers of a purely individualistic worldview.
So focusing only on ourselves.
Exactly.
Okay, I can see how that could be a problem.
If we just focus on our own autonomy, we might lose sight of our connections to other people.
And our responsibilities to them.
Exactly. And those bigger aspects of life that go beyond just us as individuals.
So it's about finding a balance between freedom and responsibility.
Yes. And recognizing that our freedom exists within a context.
The context.
Yeah, shaped by history, society, culture, even spirituality.
So it's not this isolated thing.
Right. It's all connected, and without that awareness, freedom can actually become a destructive force.
That's a really interesting perspective.
It makes you think about freedom in a new light.
It really does. It's
Yeah.
like we need some kind of framework to ground our freedom.
Yeah, I like that.
And maybe that framework is rooted in something larger than ourselves.
That's a really insightful way to put it.
And it doesn't even have to be explicitly religious, right?
Exactly. And I think that gets to the heart of what Joas is saying,
Where's that?
that freedom and faith aren't actually opposites.
Okay.
They're both trying to answer that fundamental question, what does it mean to be human?
In a world that's both beautiful and totally confusing.
Exactly. And he leaves us with this big question. If our ability to choose freedom is itself shaped by forces beyond our control, what does that mean for how we understand both faith and autonomy?
It's like a riddle wrapped in an enigma.
It really is. And it's something to think about.
Right, it
Let's-
really is. So where do we go from here with this idea? It really is something to think about. It's a real head scratcher.
Isn't it? It's like, if our ability to choose is shaped by things we can't control,
Exactly.
does that make us less free?
Right.
Or could it actually give our choices more meaning?
It's a tough one. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, it's funny.
What's that?
Even the act of questioning our freedom,
Yeah.
it means we have some level of autonomy, right?
That's true. I guess it wouldn't even occur to us to question it if we weren't free to some extent.
Exactly, it's a paradox.
It really is. And it's not like this is a new question either.
Right.
Philosophers and theologians have been going back and forth on this
Beginning of the
forever.
century.
So where does that leave us? What are we supposed to do with this mind-bending idea?
I don't think there's one right answer.
Okay.
But I think what Joas wants us to do
Yeah.
is to embrace the complexity.
Okay, so be okay with the fact that it's a bit of a puzzle.
Exactly. Acknowledge the tension between freedom and faith.
Between autonomy and dependence.
Yeah. And be comfortable not having all the answers.
So it's more about the journey than reaching some final destination.
I think that's a great way to put it.
Okay, I like that.
It's about understanding that this search for meaning, it's ongoing.
And that we might never have all the answers.
Yes, exactly. But that's okay.
So we should just keep asking questions.
Yeah.
Even if we never find that one definitive answer.
And you know what? The very act of searching and questioning,
Yeah.
that in itself shows our capacity for freedom.
That's a really good point. I
Yeah.
love that perspective.
Me too.
It's like we're all on this quest to figure out who we are
Right.
and how we fit into the universe.
Exactly. And that quest is shaped by both
Okay.
the choices we make
Yeah.
and the things we can't control.
The forces beyond us.
Exactly.
This whole conversation has got me thinking that maybe freedom and faith aren't really that different.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, if our understanding of freedom is always changing.
Right. Always evolving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And being shaped by new ideas and experiences, then maybe the real lesson here
Yeah.
is to never stop questioning.
Keep an open mind.
Yes. And never stop exploring these ideas.
Even if we never have all the answers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because there's always something new to learn and discover.
I couldn't agree more.
That's a pretty good place to wrap up, I think. What do you think?
I think so too.
This has been such an interesting deep dive. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, the pleasure was all mine. I always enjoy these conversations.
And thank you to all of our listeners for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.
And keep those questions coming.